Welcome to Surrounded by Sports, the podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Perkins, and today it is my pleasure to talk with Brian Watson. Brian is the J head football and softball coach, a state championship softball coach, and he has turned around the football program over there fairly quickly. Brian, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good. How about you?
Man, I'm good. I'm good. Thank you for coming on. We appreciate you. Today we will talk with Brian, who is a J native, about his path back home, his relationship with Elijah Bell, his former high school coach, and also he was an assistant for Elijah. And then we'll talk about their back and forth relationship over the years. We'll talk about rural sports. We'll talk to it. We'll be uniquely able to talk to a man who has had success coaching, not only as a head coach in football, but also a coordinator. So he's had success coaching young men and young ladies in multiple sports. And so this is it's kind of neat for me, but also the rural aspect of rural sports is what we call it here in Florida, the smaller schools. And we get to talk about that too. Brian, you sound good to you?
Yes, sounds good.
All right, man. All that and more after this.
You are watching Surrounded by Sports, a podcast hosted by Kevin Perkins. This show emphasizes how sports and life intersect while showcasing the Gulf Coast. And now, Surrounded by Sports.
Brian, you grew up there, obviously. You were a three-sport athlete?
Correct. Yes, I was.
Yeah. What sports?
I played football, basketball, and baseball. Played it all through youth and all through high school.
Okay. What did your parents get you into sports, or was it just kind of the thing everybody was doing?
No, my parents were very involved in my athletic career. You know, it was when we was growing up back home. It was play sports or go to work.
Right, right. And sports sounded real good in that aspect.
Yes, it did.
Right. So I didn't plan on talking about that, but your parents were involved heavily with you.
Yes, I mean they were J folks also. So you know, it's just in the community. You know, everybody just we have good, real strong youth programs. You know, we have football. We have a basketball league that's been there forever. One of the few youth programs that's been there probably over 40 years. And then our baseball and softball is strong also.
So, and I mean, like you said, your pre-high school years weren't yesterday, and right, and so, but Jay still has strong youth sports.
Yes, yes. You know, that's probably why it is. You know, coaching and working at Jay is so rewarding. Is just because we get people coming in who have played sports. You know, it's not a lot of you know we don't have to teach a lot of fundamentals because they get that in our youth program.
Right, right, and that's a beautiful thing too. That's the community aspect of being in that small town, and it's neat that it's to you. Has the J community changed a ton over the years?
No, I mean, you know, we're getting a little bit bigger, but not by much. You know, I
Right.
think we had 90 in our graduating class, and I had 70, you know, in mine. So it's really not growing, but as you know, it's not a lot has changed up here. You know, it's just not a lot of, you know, um, it's a farming community. You know,
Right.
so there's not new businesses just being popped up or new places popped up because our land is farmland up here.
Right. And also, Jay's always had quality sports, right?
Yeah. Yes, we've you know we put a for the most part. I think this year only one sport didn't make the playoffs. Last year, every sport made the playoffs, and that's unheard of in probably any in the rural, but in any high school that every
Absolutely.
sport is in the playoffs. You know, so yeah, we're a well-rounded athletic school up here.
Absolutely. So what positions did you play in each sport? Like basketball, what did you play?
Basketball, I was point guard. Um, let's see. Baseball, I was a catcher and shortstop, and this was in high school, obviously. And then
Right.
in football, I was the middle linebacker, and I played everywhere on the offensive line. I think I ended up at center, you know, towards the end.
Okay.
Uh,
Center, middle linebacker, point guard, catcher. You kind of played the same position in each sport.
yeah,
You're kind of the captain of what's going on at the moment, right?
I had never really thought of it that way, but yeah, those were the positions I played.
Right. Well, that prepares you for being a coach, doesn't it?
I absolutely believe that. I tell people all the time. I said, they ask me how are you, can coach everything. I said, well, I played everything, and I was growing up. I just thought about, the sports and in the second, just not going and playing, but the strategy of the sport.
Right. But for example, as a catcher, and I've talked about this on other episodes, I feel like catchers are really great coaches. But with linebackers especially too, because the catcher, you got to know what this guy's doing, that guy's doing, what the positioning is for the players, so you know what pitch to call, et cetera, right? Plus, you're doing a little bit of psychology with whoever's on the hill.
Yeah, and and then the first and third plays, you got to know them. You giving those, and you see everything. Yeah,
right. Sidebar, drives me crazy when I see a catcher set up outside and the shift's on. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Sidebar. But go back to other stuff. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of that shift in baseball.
Right. Well, they kind of outlawed it, but they still move. But it's crazy to me if you're not pitching inside. If you want him to pull the ball, why are you throwing the ball away? That kind of thing.
Exactly.
But, okay, let's go back to it, though. As a linebacker, you'd have to know what each lineman is doing, and you have to kind of know the shell behind you, and you are the shell behind the line. So
yeah, and you got to know the defensive lineman, making sure they're lining up in the correct gap, or the correct shoulder on the defensive lineman too.
Right, and the center, of course, is kind of running the whole offensive line.
They make the calls on blocking schemes as far as in our system now we have a couple on pass protections. Our center sets it. We don't call the pass protection when we call a play because our center is supposed to already know it, and he gets it to the lineman. So yeah, once you look about that, there's a lot of detail in those positions.
A point guard is the tempo, not only the tempo you play at, but your coworkers' tempo and the mentality.
Yeah.
So your relationship at each of those positions is unique to the coach as well.
Yep.
All right, let's follow that. You go to PJC, right? And you wind up as a catcher there. Your relationship with Bill Hamilton, who was a fantastic coach over there at PJC, which is now PSC, that was pretty good too?
Yeah. I ended up tearing my ACL in my senior year in football. So going into to PJC, I didn't get to play at all my senior year. So I was on an academic scholarship at PSC, walked on, or was a preferred player. And, kind of struggled with my mobility coming off an ACL because we ain't got the technology like we did right now. So I caught my freshman year, and then I moved to the DH and first base my sophomore year at PJC. Yeah.
Right. This is going to be a staple in your life. You did what you needed to do for the team. Or going.
Fortunately, I could hit a little bit too, so they got me in the lineup.
That's right. Now, you finish up your schooling at Florida State. You finish up your academics there. Now, what gets you to go Noles? Go Noles?
Yeah, go Noles.
Yeah, and then you wind up in Georgia. Now, was that I'm gonna guess you fell in love?
No. I had graduated at Florida State, didn't want to leave it, but my parents was like, "Hey, you got to get a job." I had a friend, and actually, I'm going to be the best man at his wedding again this weekend. But he was a year ahead of me. And he had a job up there in Riverdale, and they needed a PE teacher. And he just called me up out of the blue one day and said, "You want a job?" And I was like, "Sure." I was just working my little small job there in Tallahassee, and I said, "Sure." And I came up there, and then that's when I started my coaching and teaching career.
Oh, okay. So you meet your wife up there?
Correct. I met her up there in the high school. Yeah, when I moved over to high school.
What did you do at Riverdale? How do you get into coaching high school?
Clayton County, the school system I was at, they had middle school sports, and it was really big. I'm talking about it was. I wish this area right here would get into that. We had football, we had basketball, we had track. They did not have baseball and softball, but they had all the other sports in middle school. So I started coaching at at the middle school level. I think my first job was a track job. Then the next year, because football season had already started when I got up there, and then I started coaching football, and then I got a basketball job, and I was successful in those. And then Jonesboro High School came calling, so I moved over to Jonesboro High School. And every year I said I'm coming back home, but I would always get a raise or get promoted up there to a higher position. And so after 3 years of Riverdale Middle School, I ended up at Jonesboro High School, and that started my varsity coaching career.
Now, you offensive coordinator by trade?
Yeah, I started out as running backs. Jonesboro, they're 6A school up there, so my first role was a running back. So, that just kind of got me on the offensive side of the ball. Because that was my first gig.
Right now, you wind up coming back, but so up there though, that's huge schools.
Yeah, there's huge schools. And that place was just taking off, growing. I mean, it was played and coached and played against a lot of great athletes.
Right, you coached the Douglas boys, Harry and Tony.
Yes, they were at our school, but yeah, they were a pleasure. Those were great kids. They I mean, just really, really, really good kids.
Yeah, Harry. I think you can probably see Harry on ESPN right now.
Yeah. I text him about once a year, so that's pretty cool just to sit there and I'll tell him I see him on TV every now and then, and
right.
Proud of him. So, and he's done a great job of of extending his career,
Mm-hmm.
But it goes back to him getting his education. He had two great parents that really forced the education on him
right.
in the high school, and he was able to succeed because he had a skill set. But I think he played 9 years in the NFL, and that was a 6'6" wide receiver. Those guys are everywhere.
Right.
To last league that long, it speaks volumes of him.
Well, if you can stick, that means A, you're a good teammate, and B, they don't have to worry about you. You're there when you're supposed to be there and all that stuff. Tony, talking about extending your career, I saw the other day, Tony just won another championship in Portugal.
Really? Okay.
So I don't know how long.
I followed him when he was in the NBA. He was about 4 years, 4 or 5 years, and like I said, he's a 6'1" point guard. They're everywhere. So when people go to making cuts and saving salary caps, usually those are the guys that do it. But and I knew he was playing overseas, so that's good to see.
Well, I mean, think about it. He's been getting paid to play now for like 15. I don't know how long he's been getting paid to play.
It's been a while.
And he's getting to live in Portugal. That's pretty cool.
That is cool.
But anyway, let's go back to you. What brings you home?
I had my son. He just turned 22, so he was 1 year old, and Coach Elijah Bell was at J High School. He was wanting to just change up some things up there, and and I had been away for 7 years, had been coaching in a different system and everything, and so he wanted new ideas, and so he reached out to me, and so I guess you can say the rest is history. We moved down here, and just never really thought about coming back home until I had a family, and then I was like, I didn't want to raise them in a bigger city, so
right.
Jay it was the year we moved back was the year Ivan hit, and we're like, what did we just do?
That's right. It's one thing, small town's one thing, but also not a lot of hurricanes in Georgia.
No, there's not.
So you get back here though, and he brought you down to be a coordinator, I'm guessing.
Yes, offense coordinator. Yes.
And then he hands you the softball job.
That was about how it happened too. Yeah, he goes, "Oh yeah, if you take this offense coordinator job, you're also the softball coach."
Okay, so you knew how to coach football. So what's the first thing you do when you get handed the softball job?
Well, I just waited. Obviously when we were in the middle of football season, as soon as it got over, I reached out to Coach Hamilton at PJC, and I'll never call it PSC. It'd be PJC to me.
It's hard.
It is. And said, "Hey, can I go watch y'all's softball team practice? Because I'm, new coach up here." And he said, "Sure, no problem." So he called Brenda Pena, which me and her are still friends right now. I mean, I went to a basketball game this past year. She come up and hugged me. So, you know, I watched them for 2 days practice, and I'm sitting there, well, this is a lot of the same drills, a lot of the same concepts. You know, obviously a few things are different, but you know, uh, I said, I think I got it, and I took it and I ran with it, and you know, um, and still coaching it 21 years later.
Right, and recently, 2022, you won a state championship. First of all, congratulations on that.
Thank
And
you.
one question though I have is, when you played, you high school coaches didn't have to. If a parent was involved, the coach could just say, "No, they do it my way," right? But nowadays, you do have, and you talked to me about this off screen. You do have like a pitcher that comes in. They're going to have somebody that works with them in the off season. What is that change like, and how does that help you with your relationship with them?
Well, you know, everything is very similar to baseball except the pitching. Um,
Hmm.
and most of these girls, if you don't learn the pitching concepts early at a younger age, you know, it's really hard to learn that later on or to be successful or pitch at a high level. So when they get to me, you know, I'm not trying to change anything, and a lot of them are different. You know, they're not the same. Every pitcher's a little bit different. Nobody's exactly the same, and you know, they go to different pitching coaches. So you know, like this past year, I had my pitcher. She would go, you know, every other weekend to her pitching coach, and I would. She would always ask me, "What do we need to work on? What you know? What?" So you know, just having a little communication with that. So yeah, there it is different. That you know, I don't you know, I call the pitches, and you know, we work on locations and we work on certain things. But as far as the fundamentals, I can see when they start breaking down. But for teaching all that, they do have an outside coach on that right there. So you know, that's kind of unique. And but you know, you see all the pitchers do it because I follow a lot of other web pages and stuff. But that's just the way. I guess you can say high school softball or softball in general is different than baseball because, you know, there's not many people going to pitching coaches in baseball during the season.
Hmm.
Whereas all the softball are still going to their pitching coaches.
Well, I know a lot of guys around, a lot of coaches, and a lot of times with baseball, the relationship between personal trainer, position coach, hitting instructor, all that I wouldn't say friction, but sometimes coaches yearn for the way it was.
Yeah.
And you, in your position, you embraced the change, and it has reaped benefits.
Yeah, I definitely, you know, and you know, it was either, you know, be hard or, you know, but that was just one part of the game of softball that I just didn't, you know, I've never done it. You know, I mean, why would I sit there and try to teach somebody to do something I have never done? You know, and it's different for everybody. But you know, they've all had pitching coaches, and I think the level of play here is so much better now, is because now we have so many girls. We have second generation, and we're starting to get third generation of fast pitch softball. Uh, and that's why I think our level of play in this area and the state of Florida and our colleges is so good, is just because now, you know, 20 years ago, the only way to get a pitching coach, I mean, one of the pitching coaches in this area was from California, and she doesn't move back. But now we have so many different people who can go out and teach these girls softball, which is, you know, whereas 20 years ago, that was not available.
Right. Well, you're in the midst of this crazy rise in women's sports, right? Like ESPN has finally realized people will watch softball. Softball, I say it all the time, softball's baseball in a microwave. It's fun to watch.
Yep.
You know, and so people have started, you know, they see the numbers. Millions of people watch the softball World Series. Millions of people watch Caitlin Clark play basketball. You know, and so all of a sudden the funding is there. And like you said, in the fairly recent past, we transitioned around here from slow pitch to fast pitch. But now you're getting that second generation of coach, that third generation of coach. And, you know, you're a powerhouse in softball. Pace is a powerhouse in softball. Those aren't the only, you know, Northview just had a good run, you know, to the state championship game. The rise of quality play in this area is crazy. But another thing is a lot of people in this area, as you know, invest in their children.
Yes. You know, and that goes back to, now you got mothers out there who played softball, who can actually relate to what their daughters are going through. And then you have, there's a lot of good coaches, and, um, even the male coaches now have been around it for a little while, or they've coached their daughters all the way up through it. And now they've got 10 years worth of coaching involved in it. So, in the high school, I think that's probably one of the biggest things you see different is that, we do rely on a little bit more of outside the fence help, to get our girls ready to get to there.
Is that one of the differences you think between coaching boys and girls sports?
I think, especially in the softball, between softball and baseball, I think that is, it's because, well, let's be honest, everybody growing up has played some level of baseball, whether it was, T-ball or everything. So everybody knows that part, but I think, when you do get into the male and female on that and in the spring sport there, I really think that sometimes that, you got to have those good players. You got to get them coming in. It's hard to build a good softball player if she's never played until her freshman year.
Right. Now, I'll tell you what. Let's do this. Let's transition. Let's talk about something about rural schools that's important. You get them at Jay in the 7th grade.
Yeah, that is a huge success, and not all schools are like that. I would say probably maybe half the schools, maybe even less than that. But we do have a real good advantage on other teams, because if they are, but some of the schools in the rules are a little bit bigger, so they're not having the model 7 through 12. Basically, the rural school is designed to give the rural towns that, like Jay, we're a little isolated. We don't have it. We just can't pull from a lot of people. We have what we have. We get them in 7th grade. We get our football players in the weight room in 7th grade. We don't have a lot of surprises, and our elementary campus is on the campus of the high school. They're kind of connected, so we know all the kids that are coming up. Whereas, sometimes, in the larger schools, they don't know the freshmen until they get there, unless they have a direct middle school feeder. But some of the bigger towns do that. But
you can't really recruit either.
No,
that's a long drive.
Yeah, if a kid transfers to Jay, it's because they want to play. We don't. With the way, they can't get on the field at a bigger school or something like that, or, sometimes they come because they want to be a part of our winning program. But,
right.
But yeah, that is, no, we don't, it's just not hard. It's just because there's a lot of difficulties in just getting up here, and that would be a drive,
Right. Okay. So let's transition into, you coached women's basketball too for a little bit.
Correct.
Or ladies, right?
Yes.
Yeah. You won at that as well. You did well at that.
Yeah, I've coached it for 4 years and won the district title the first 2 years and was runner-up the third year. So, and then the fourth year we started a bunch of young girls, and they're still here at Jay now, and they've won 3 consecutive district titles, and the majority of that class is still juniors. So right. They'll be juniors next year. So.
And that's another testimony to, like, your baseball, your softball, your 7th through 12th model gives you a standard and a through line of your system.
Correct.
That's great. Now let's switch over to football real quick. You 4 years ago you became the head football coach. Is that right?
I just finished my 3rd season. Yes.
3rd year. Okay, 3rd year. Now, so you're going into 4th. Elijah was your guy when you played for him, and then you coached for him as a coordinator for a while, right?
Correct.
And you when you get the head job, you brought him back, Elijah Bell, back to be your JV coach. Is that right?
Yeah. It was just when I took over, it didn't happen immediately, but I was just like, I got to have somebody that, I didn't have a full staff at the time, so I was trying to fill out a staff. And actually, he came to me. He was retired, and he said, "I'll do anything you want me to do." And I said, "What do you want, coach?" He goes, "Let me think about that." And and so he come back, and I said, "What do you want to do?" He goes, "I think I want to coach JV." And I said, "Absolutely, you got it." So that just having somebody with that experience with your younger guys, and we have the same terminology and everything like that. That was just one less thing I had to worry about, because I had to we had to change a lot of things when we took over here, but not having to worry about coaching my JV or if they were getting coached, if I had the right people, that was a real blessing.
Okay, so you've been off and on with Elijah the bulk of your life,
Correct.
right? How has he influenced you?
It just when you stay out of school as long as he did, in some years you'd have your good years and bad years. It just kind of comes in that way up here at Jason sometimes. He was always willing to work. But he was one of them that was probably, I'm gonna do more, just because that's the way you got to do it. We got to, so sometimes, and then the kids were always prepared, when we had, because of that, and now that's doing more sometimes is not the way to do things in today's age. So I do know that when I feel like I need to slack off a little bit or knock back, we got to continue to push through that. Just because I know it gets dull out there, but we got to make sure that our kids are ready and prepared. And so sometimes more is better, but you got to be smart in how you do it.
Also, when you're established in a community like he is, or you grow up in the community, it's a fairly natural thing to know I have to be out in the community. I have to be active out here, and my kids need to do things that are active in the community as well.
Yeah, I try to support everything in this community. We just kind of took over the rodeo, the Jay High School athletic department up here, and I had a lot to do with that. And we eat in the restaurants up here, we shop up here, and we attend. I attend pretty much all the basketball games that I can. We're at all the sports and everything. So yeah, it is neat being in here, and you got to be approachable too, and I think that helps out a lot too.
Well, it's got to be neat too to constantly have second and third generation kids that have been going to Jay. You've known Billy a long time, but Billy Jr. you've known since he was born, and now he's a senior, right?
Yeah. I just this past year, a couple of our, just we talk when we play our rivals. I can look our kids in the eyes and said, that your grandfathers played in this game.
Right.
And that gets to some of them.
Right.
When we're doing the same thing that their grandfather did, or their great grandfathers, that just kind of we can dig in a little deeper because we're in the same situation, the same colors, and playing against the same rival that their dads, their grandfathers and great grandfathers did. It really means a lot.
Right, and that's kind of the genesis of what high school sports in these areas should be, right?
Oh, correct. Yeah. When we travel to Baker, we stress that, we're on a bus with everybody, ready to go. And this is something that we've been doing every other year for about 60, 70 years now.
Right. Yeah, that's so crazy. And it's awesome, by the way, too. Hey, let's take a break real quick and let's come back and we're going to talk a little bit more about playing multiple sports, things that rural sports allow you to do. We'll do that after this, okay?
Okay.
Cool. Welcome back. I am here with Brian Watson, the head coach of the softball and football program at Jay High School. You were a multiple sport athlete. I think that, whenever I've had a chance to work a couple of the media days, and when I talk to the Northview kids or Kids Jay, whatever, they always, I play football season, but you play multiple sports. You emphasize kids playing multiple sports, which is nowadays kids like to transition into doing solo stuff.
Yeah. some of the kids, they feel like their favorite sport, they getting behind in some things, you know, and they're really not. Um, but you know, it's just, I think we just put out well-rounded athletes out here. You know, we just had, you know, two really uh, three sport, you know, probably some really good ones here that just graduated. You know, we went 9-1 in football. They made the playoffs every year in basketball, and they won a state championship last year in baseball and won a district title this year. You know, so you know, we encourage that. I think that's one of the things. You know, just you know, you've got to be able to give up a little bit as a coach. You know, there may be a workout in the summer they're not going to attend because they're playing baseball. You know, and there may be some, you know, sometimes that you're not going to have them out of season. Now, in season, we get them, obviously, in season. So out of season, you got to sacrifice your out of season stuff, but you got to know they're getting work too, you know. But if you really pressure those kids to do things like, you know, if I pressure some of my baseball and basketball kids to start workouts back in January, you know, I'm going to run them off, you know. And so, you know, we're not a big school up here, so we need our best athletes playing on the field, you know, and it's just one of the things that we're going to get. Yeah, we run into some things when we play some teams that are bigger, you know, and they just all have nothing but basketball players, and they have all, you know, yeah, we lose a little bit in that, but for the most part, though, our overall success here at Jay, you know, really depends on three sport athletes.
Right. Well, also the baseball team doesn't win state if you're not cooperative as a football coach.
100%. You know, if I'm trying to make them, you know, because we were in spring practice. Obviously, I'm not going to make those kids come out there. But if I even kind of was getting in their head, you know, after practice one day, they come out there to the football field and start throwing the football, and I told them, no, put it down. You know, if you want to come, watch. You know, don't get out here and start running routes. And you know, that was my quarterback, and I didn't have a quarterback on the field. So, you know, so, but those are little things you got to get, you know, and at the end of the day, the kids appreciate that, you know.
Right. Because they're working hard. If you're playing football and baseball, you're taking BP year round.
100%.
You can't be good at baseball without taking BP. If you're playing basketball and softball, you're taking BP year round. Right. And which means you're making good grades because you can't play on a team if you don't do well in school. So you're doing that part. And then you're making all the practices, you're lifting weights, you're getting your running in everything. And like you said, there's got to be a lot of trust between you and the baseball coach, right?
Correct. You know, that just, and the kids, they got to know that they're going to miss out on some things, but they got to do some of that stuff on their own too if they want to be competitive. The ones who try and don't, you know, they got to lift a little bit on their own. You know, they're not going to make our team sessions. That's okay. As long as we're doing it on, you know, on your own and getting it on your own. It's because we still want to be successful. You know, to be successful in football, you've got to lift weights, you know, right. So you got to do that on your own. So.
Well, and two, look at what you're raising. You're training, but you're also raising an adult.
Yeah, we're raising a kid, and I think the biggest message to that is if you work hard, you know, good things are going to come with that right there. And I think the group that we've had the last 2 or 3 years was the epitome of working hard and working on their own. And the successes we've had has been that, because, you know, that's the message I think, you know, we try to get across. Work hard and good things are going to happen.
Right. Well, and two, the modern era employee is multiple revenue streams.
Correct.
Figuring out ways to make money in more than one thing. And what's the best training for that?
Yeah.
Right?
Exactly.
A multiple sport athlete who does well in school. You know, I mean, you're constantly having to learn things. You're constantly bettering yourself, and you're prioritizing this meeting, that meeting, you know, you're where you're supposed to be when you're supposed to be there, which is a big part of what you're learning in sports, right?
And the other thing is you got to communicate too. I mean, the communication skills that you got to communicate with different adults, you know, different adults that may be demanding in certain areas, you know, and you know, the kids that do that are, I mean, you know, I think they're getting a leg up and being successful.
100%. As we wrap this, what do you think? Well, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention your daughter plays at UWF. You've coached both your children. What is that like as a head coach? Is that tricky? Did it allow you to have more time with them?
You know, it's rewarding, but it is tricky, and and sometimes we might have leaned on them a little too much. And my son, he was a center in football, and then we just moved him around on the offensive line and everywhere because it was nice. It was very enjoyable watching him grow into a young man, and he ended up being a heck of a football player. And he just graduated this past month from Florida State, so I'm very proud of that.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And then my daughter, I think it was a little harder with the girls just because, uh, I demanded a lot out of her sometimes, and she wanted to see sometimes what she'd get away with. It's just what it was. Or, the girls would always ask her to ask the questions. Hey, can we go do this? They knew the answers to most of the questions, but they would always get her to answer them. So it
Right.
was trying to be daddy and coach. Sometimes it was a little difficult, a little bit more difficult with her.
Right. Well, they would pitch to her the idea you might say no on.
Yeah. First time it was a hard no, but they know she would ask it.
Right. Right. Now, what do you think are like some universal truths about coaching boys and girls sports?
Probably the things is that, the commitment the girls and boys make. I mean, they're so committed. I think that's probably everybody says, some things, you know, but as far as if you're organized and you get them and you get good players and everything, those kids are so committed, both boys and girls, and that's one thing I know that is true. And then probably one of the biggest things, the differences in coaching girls and boys is girls are a little bit better athletically younger in their 9th and 10th grade year than their junior and senior year because they grow up into young ladies.
Mhm.
Whereas boys are uncoordinated in 8th, 9th, and 10th, and then their best years athletically as far as maturity, because boys mature a little bit later, is their junior and senior years.
Right.
I think that's one of the biggest differences in coaching both of them is it's more of a mental aspect with older girls, whereas with the boys it's more of a physical aspect.
Right. Do girls from your experience, do girls excel at the fundamentals a little quicker?
Yes, because I think that they want to learn how to do it, and that comes back with that second generation of coaching too. Is because the girls that are coaching, young female coaches, they're coming off what they're taught, so they will teach fundamentals, and girls will pick it up because sometimes a girl physically can't do something the right way unless they're fundamentally sound. Whereas a boy, they learn to throw that ball from their hip. If they're shooting basketball, they'll and it may take them years to get out of that because
Mm-hmm.
they want to go shoot the 3-pointer instead of shooting the 6-foot shot. They want to learn. That's how they learn. Everybody learns how to shoot a 3-pointer. First, they don't want to shoot the inside shot, the boring shot, and so
Right.
So where girls will learn to shoot that inside shot a little bit quicker and then move out
And then start to back away. Right. Okay, so what do you think? Like, we talked off screen, off air about maybe the emphasis can sometimes be too much on getting a scholarship when the emphasis should probably be more about the kids' development and stuff like that.
Yeah, I think a lot of people phase out of sports in high school because especially if they're on a real good team with some really good players, is because they're not getting looked at as a college coach. Maybe, colleges are looking at this guy right here, and that's the only one that's getting all the attention from colleges. Is that, they may phase out of that because why am I playing if I'm not going to college to play sports? And that's not what it's about. I mean, it's playing in college is hard. I think, those college coaches, they do their homework, and they want to have somebody that can be successful. But I think sometimes we lose the focus in high school sports. Maybe outside, a lot of the parents, they want their child to possibly be a college athlete, but if it's not, it's okay. And we think that's failure now, and that's not failure.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's probably one of the biggest, things that I probably not the most happy with is that when sometimes they may look at me and say, well, you're not getting my kid a scholarship. Well, your kid's not a college player, let's get the most we can out of high school, and let's learn to be a good teammate, learn to be a good student, like we said, all the things that comes with that, communicator and all those kind of things, so that's probably one of the things, is sometimes that we think that high school sports is to get a college scholarship, and it's just not applicable in some situations.
Well, the point of all this is to get people prepared for what happens after high school. And that's not going to be center fielder for the Braves.
100%.
It could be, 1 in a million.
Yeah.
But it for the rest of us, that's not how that works. But can I be successful in a work environment? Can I, like you said, I practice talking to adults who are coaches and teachers and figuring out where I'm supposed to be, when I'm supposed to be there, and having hard conversations, because eventually I'll have to have a hard conversation with my wife, with my boss, with my friend, and I need to be prepared for that.
Yeah. Have those conversations, tough conversations where it's constructive criticism sometimes. People think that I'm getting on to you. No, I'm just being honest.
Right.
And if you can get that and learn that skill at a young age in high school, if you get that out of high school, you're so far ahead of everything, going into the big world. Because once you get into the real world, that's what I try to tell them. When things get hard here, just wait. It's going to get harder.
Right, but if you can get through constructive criticism and take that advice and turn it into something positive, that is a huge key to success in your life.
100%.
Right. Do you have do you think there's like a mission statement for J Sports?
No, I mean, I think I said it earlier. I think, I think if the kids, if they honestly put in the hard work, don't cut corners, don't find shortcuts or anything like that, that we're going to be successful. I mean, it's just in all of our sports, we have a chance to be successful. And hopefully that's the way they look at it. And if they learn anything from playing in sports at Jay, is that, hard work will get you where you want to go. It might not be the quickest, and, there might not be shortcuts, but we just keep working, our football slogan is day by day. We just try to get better, day by day, just get a little bit better.
Right.
And so I would like for those kids to know that, just that. I mean, so today's generation wants to start out on the top so quick.
Right.
They don't trust the process, or they don't enjoy the process of getting to the top, because they want to go straight to the top. And
that's right. And the proof's in the pudding.
Correct.
You guys are successful in everything you do. Also, it's and we're going to wrap on that, but it is interesting to me that every time you read a book about a championship season or a performer getting to the highest points, they say things like, once I got there, that really wasn't what it wound up being all about.
Yeah.
It was about the journey.
It is. And I think that's good. And we get our kids, up here at Jay at a younger age. So ours starts in 7th grade, and they don't realize that. They don't realize they're starting their journey,
Right. And you get to have them for that whole, from the child to the young adult. You get to watch and help out in that progress. Thank you so much for your time, Brian. I appreciate you.
Thank you, Kevin. I enjoyed it.
All right. I'm Kevin Perkins. That's Brian Watson. This is Surrounded by Sports. Please watch, like, subscribe. I'll have links here that'll show you where you can find the website. Also, you can follow us on X, TikTok, all that stuff. And thank you very much for watching. Appreciate y'all. Brian.